Hola muchachos, ¿qué tal? Buenos días. Aquí tienen el horario para hoy, miércoles el 26 de abril. No homework was due for today, no homework due for next class. No homework, no homework, no homework. All right, let's go ahead and get to the daily objective, our to-dos. Continuing our conversation as we began last class, going over the beginning of chapter 4b. We'll begin with your warm-up. ¿Cómo te saludas? How do you greet the following groups of people? We'll review our notes on los buenos modales, good manners, on pages 212 and 213. We'll do a little pair practice with that vocabulary, and then we'll dive into the new grammar, new notes for today, the difference in use between the preterite and the imperfect, and then do a little guided practice to wrap up class today. So if we look at the textbook in the beginning of chapter 4b, 4b was all about, or is all about, your favorite holidays and celebrations from when you were younger. So continuing our conversation about our childhood, but through the lens of customs and traditions. So you'll be able to listen and read about family celebrations, talking right about how you and your family used to celebrate holidays, and exchange that information about where, with whom, and how you used to celebrate holidays as a child. So this is what we did last class. We went over the vocabulary of how we engage family, friends, colleagues, classmates, teammates, neighbors, etc. How we engage with them interpersonally. Talked about typical celebrations, aniversario, cumpleaños, Día de Independencia, hacer un picnic. And then we began to see how this vocabulary is used in context by taking a look at the video La Fiesta de San Pedro and answering the comprehension questions there down below. You can take a look at the daily agenda video from last class for the questions themselves and some ideas for how you can go about finding those answers in the text. All right, so what we're going to do today is begin to use this vocabulary in our own context, beginning with exercise 7, where you guys are going to answer questions about how you typically interact with the following groups of people. And forgive me, I realize that we did not even look at the warm-up first and foremost. And the warm-up is exactly what you're going to be doing in exercise 7. For each of these questions below, indicate how you greet each of the following groups of people using key vocabulary from textbooks 212 and 213. So, for example, generalmente, ¿cómo saludas a tus primos? How do you greet your cousins? Generalmente nos abrazamos. This is the verb abrazarse, conjugated in the nosotros form, because it's a reciprocal action. It's something that you're doing to each other or for each other. Next example, generalmente, ¿cómo saludas a tus hermanos? How do you greet your siblings? Bueno, por lo general nos decimos hola, ¿qué tal? So a couple examples there. We give each other a hug. We tell each other, nos decimos. Decimos comes from the verb decir, to say. Like when you ask the question, ¿cómo se dice? You're asking, how do you say, right? Decir is the verb to say. So we say to each other, hello, what's going on? Hey, what's up? All right, so let's go ahead and knock out these 4 warm-up questions. Generalmente, ¿cómo saludas a tus profesores? How do you greet your teachers? Generalmente, ¿cómo saludas a tus abuelos? How do you greet your grandparents? Generalmente, ¿cómo saludas a tus compañeros de equipo? How do you greet your teammates? And generalmente, ¿cómo saludas a alguien a quien no conoces bien? How do you greet someone who you don't know very well? Like they're an acquaintance, if you will. un conocido. And so that's essentially what you guys are going to be doing for exercise 7. ¿Cómo saludas y te despides de estas personas? So, same thing, just different groups of people. Number 1, we've actually already done. That was part of the warm-up. Number 2, you could argue we've already done as well, although they're using the verb despedirse, which is the verb to say goodbye. Saludar is the verb to say hello. ¿Cómo te despides de los padres de tus amigos? How do you bid farewell to your parents or your friend's parents? ¿Cómo saludas a tu papá o mamá? How do you greet your mom or dad? ¿Cómo te despides de tu mejor amigo o amiga? How do you say goodbye to your best friend? And then finally, ¿cómo saludas a un amigo que no has visto recientemente? How do you greet a friend that you haven't seen recently? So, just as you do in your response, por lo general, then I want to encourage you to actually conjugate the verbs reflexively, reciprocally. We'll look at that grammar in greater detail later this chapter by just including that reflexive pronoun nos. Put nos in front of your conjugation to indicate that it's a reciprocal action, like the examples we did in our warm-up. Exercise 8 on page 218 is a really good practice, and actually this is going to be great practice for the speaking or the oral presentation you're going to do at the end of this chapter, where you're picking one of your favorite celebrations and describing what it used to be like, what did you used to do to celebrate, who did you used to get together with. You're going to be describing your memories of how you used to celebrate that favorite holiday. So this is great practice for that. ¿Qué hacían ustedes? What did you guys do to celebrate these 4 special occasions? Cumplir años, a birthday. Hacer un largo viaje, taking a long trip. Maybe somebody in your family was taking a long trip. Comprar un coche nuevo, buying a new car. That's a big accomplishment. Or maybe a new house. You could put una casa nueva instead of un coche nuevo if you want to switch it up. Y celebrar un día festivo, just to celebrate a holiday, any holiday. Holiday in español, un día festivo. So, for example, ¿qué hacía tu familia cuando alguien celebraba un aniversario? What did you and your family used to do when someone celebrated an anniversary? And you can see how they conjugated the verb celebrar. This means that it's a continuous, like a tradition or a custom, right? It's something that you continuously did in the past. De costumbre. So what did you and your family used to do to celebrate an anniversary? You're going to pick at least 2 of these activities here from student B to say what you used to do, and you're going to conjugate those verbs in the imperfect, in the nosotros form, to say what you and your family used to do to celebrate that special occasion. So, ¿qué hacía tu familia cuando alguien celebraba un aniversario? Pues hacíamos una fiesta. That's this expression here. We had a party, a surprise party, una fiesta de sorpresa. Y regalábamos cosas muy bonitas. Regalar is the verb to give as a gift. And you'll see that both of these verbs are conjugated in the imperfect. If you don't remember, no recuerdo lo que hacíamos. I don't remember what we used to do. So, for example, ¿qué hacía tu familia cuando alguien cumplía? You're going to conjugate this verb. These verbs you're going to conjugate in the imperfect in the él, ella, usted form, because we're talking about somebody, right? whoever that is, we don't know, but it is a singular person. So third person singular conjugation in the imperfect would be cumplía. ¿Qué hacía tu familia cuando alguien cumplía años? What did your family used to do when somebody celebrated a birthday? Pues nos reuníamos en casa, got together at the house, right? Invitábamos a mis abuelos, mis primos, mis tíos, mis amigos, etc. Hacíamos una reunión de familia, a family reunion. Regalábamos, gave gifts, or comprábamos regalos, we bought gifts. Felicitábamos, congratulated whomever it was that was having a birthday. So plenty of different expressions here, and you can find all of these in the glossary at the end of the chapter, which is on page 234, forgive me. Gives you a glossary of all these verbs. All right, getting to the new grammar, new lesson for today, we'll spend maybe about the next 2 to 3 minutes wrapping up, is the difference in use between the preterite and the imperfect. We already began to look at the differences when we introduced the imperfect at the beginning of chapter 4a. Preterite is used for completed actions, actions that just happen one time, right? Like what you did over the weekend, or what you did last night, or what you did earlier this morning. Those are non-continuous, things that happen once. Preterite. Imperfect is used to describe continuous actions in the past, right? Things that we used to do continuously, repeatedly in the past. We talked about context clues for the imperfect, usually being adverbs of frequency. Generalmente, normalmente, típicamente, usualmente, a veces, siempre, nunca, etc. Whereas preterite is going to have a specific action, or a specific reference to the past, right? A quantifiable reference to the past, like ayer, right? Yesterday. Anoche, last night. La semana pasada, last week. El mes pasado, last month. El año pasado, last year. Or specific, like hace, and then a particular period of time. Hace 50 años, 50 years ago, right? It's a completed action. It happened once, and we are indicating specifically when it happened in the past. But we have some more general differences between the preterite and the imperfect. Imperfect is used to describe people, places, and situations in the past. So when you're giving a background setting, right? Really common to use the imperfect when we look at literature. You know, when you begin a chapter in a book and it's kind of describing the setting, the background information, those descriptions are going to be what? In the imperfect, because you're describing people, places, and situations in the past. Once upon a time, all that detail, all those details, probably going to be in the imperfect, because you're setting the setting. You are setting up. You're providing the setting. To talk about a past action or situation where there is no beginning or end being specified, that would also require the imperfect, because it's a repeated action, right? Like your childhood. Yeah, you didn't say exactly when you started liking to skate, when that skater phase ended, if it has ever ended since your childhood. No, It's a general action in the past, right? No specific beginning or end, and therefore would be in the imperfect. And as we talked about earlier, when you're describing a situation or providing background information, and then when there's an action that interrupts that background setting, that interrupting action would be in the preterite. This is how we can use the imperfect and the preterite together, where the imperfect provides background information, and the preterite identifies an interrupting action, an action that takes place within that setting. Todos mis parientes bailaban cuando llegamos. All my relatives were dancing, imperfect, when we arrived. Preterite. This action takes place within that setting. Interrupting action is in the preterite. Interrupting action is in the preterite. Background information is in the imperfect. And that's highlighted there. So we're going to do exercise 10, La Semana Santa, where Patricia, una estudiante norteamericana que está pasando un año en España, les escribe a sus padres sobre una experiencia fantástica que tuvo. So Patricia is an exchange student that's spending a year in Spain, and she's writing her parents about a wonderful experience, a fantastic experience that she had celebrating La Semana Santa, which is Holy Week in Spanish. So you're going to complete her description with the appropriate form of the verb provided, either in the preterite or the imperfect. And to make that determination, just think about it. Look at the context. Is it describing a person, place, or thing in the past? Is it providing an action that really doesn't have a specific beginning or end, so no particular reference to when it happened, like how we have in the preterite? Or is it providing that background setting, and then if you see an interrupting action take place within that background setting, then you would use the preterite. And there's going to be some verbs that are typically in the preterite regardless, like to be born. To be born and to die, these aren't continuous actions, one would argue. One would argue that they happen once. We can have a philosophical conversation about whether or not they happen multiple times, but you know what I mean? To decide, and when you decide something, it just kind of happens. You know what I mean? When you start something or finish something, and again, to be born, to die, verbs that are intuitively in the preterite because they happen once, or we refer to them as happening just once in the past. All right, let's start exercise 10 together. Queridos padres, dear parents, acabo de pasar unos días increíbles. Mi familia española, and then decidir is a cognate. It's the verb to decide, and as we were just discussing, it just happens once. This is going to be in the preterite, and since you're talking about my Spanish family, this is going to be the third person singular in the preterite. Take a look at page 110. Decidir would change to decidió. Decidió. Mi familia española decidió, with an accent above the O, decided to go to Sevilla to celebrate la Semana Santa. Nosotros llegar el martes por la noche. We arrived Tuesday night. So we have a specific reference to the past here. For that reason, this verb would also be in the preterite. Nosotros llegamos. Someone who's really locked in is like, whoa, wait. I remember cargos are verbs. They have that spelling change. But remember, that's only in the yo form. Here we're in the nosotros form. So no spelling change. Llegamos for number 2. Here we're describing what the streets were like. We're saying the streets were already full of people. Llenas de personas We're describing what a situation was like in the past. So therefore, the verb estar would be in the imperfect, and if we're talking about las calles, the streets, then this would be third person plural, estaban. Las calles ya estaban llenas de personas. I'm going to do one more together. Había un desfile que en la Semana Santa se llama procesión. There was a parade, and during Holy Week we call that a procession. En la procesión, blank pasos. Pasos are floats. So in the procession, so seeing floats, is that a continuous action, or is this an action that's just happening once? Well, she's describing this experience, not a continuous experience. It's an experience she just had once on this date. So this is a completed action. So ver in the preterite, and we can assume that this is in the yo form, or maybe the nosotros form. She's talking about her and her family. Either way, it's either going to be vi or vimos, right? The verb ver in the preterite in either the yo form or the nosotros form. This is not an easy activity. It really requires you to lean on cognates and your familiarity with vocab, and that's where you need to be an active reader. And for the words that you think are consequential, meaning that they're important to understand the full context, look them up. Look them up and gain that understanding so that you can make the determination of which verb tense to use for this exercise.